hunting for fouls.
His defensive performance is unacceptable. He is a hole on the court.
And not one guy dribbling 20 times and hoist something up like Luka does with the Mavs.
It was real bad for like 5-6 straight possessions. It was like, yeah, but you can't take him out. Right? It was that bad. Like if he didn't have the offensive game he was going, this one of them situations you would have been like, JJ just gonna leave him out there? It was bad.
Luka Dončić is the worst defensive star that we've seen in the modern era of basketball.
No offense creation. Alley-oop, counted on a foul.
Last night I was expecting Wemby to be the best defensive player on the floor. That happened to be Luka. 5 steals, 2 blocks. Luka Dončić all over the place making the impact.
He was never supposed to move with this kind of explosiveness, and nobody expected him to suddenly become a better defender than Victor Wembanyama. Yet somehow, that is exactly what is happening, and the entire NBA is watching with disbelief. Dallas had no idea what they were setting in motion when they traded Luka Dončić. They thought they were simply changing their roster. Instead, they may have completely altered the balance of power in the Western Conference. Once Luka arrived in Los Angeles and found himself surrounded by a legitimate system, an offensive-minded coach, and teammates he helped bring in, something changed. He became the centerpiece of a championship-level offense, the kind of offensive engine Dallas never managed to build around him. Through his scoring and playmaking, Luka is now generating roughly 57 points of production per game. That's more offensive output than some entire second units around the league, including teams such as Detroit and Sacramento. Dallas didn't simply trade away a superstar. They traded away an entire offensive ecosystem and the weaknesses they once used to justify moving on from Luka. Los Angeles erased many of them almost immediately. Luka was never impossible to build around. He simply needed a front office willing to listen to what he needed. So when he arrived in Los Angeles, Luka got to work. He helped recruit DeAndre Ayton and brought in Marcus Smart. For perhaps the first time in his career, the roster was being constructed specifically around the way he plays basketball. And look at the results. Since the trade, the Lakers are 8-3, on a top 10 offense, and Luka is operating inside a system designed to maximize the value of virtually every possession. Meanwhile, Dallas is still trying to figure things out, slowly realizing that they didn't eliminate a problem. They created one for themselves. The instant Luka entered that Lakers facility, the entire situation changed. JJ Redick didn't simply inherit a superstar. He inherited one of the most complete offensive weapons in basketball, and instead of forcing Luka to adapt to the system, he built a system around Luka. That's why those 40-point triple-doubles don't feel shocking anymore. They're becoming the expected result when a generational player finally receives the infrastructure required to operate at maximum capacity. Dallas didn't just surrender a superstar. They gave away the supporting structure Luka had been missing for years, and Los Angeles immediately put that structure to work. But the transformation wasn't limited to the system around him. Luka himself had already started changing before the season even began. At just 26 years old, he decided not to fall back into the same habits. Instead, he essentially rebuilt his body from the ground up. He lost 18 pounds and reduced his body fat from 14% to 8.5%, reshaping his physique around speed and explosiveness rather than simply adding more muscle. His trainer, Javier Barrio, explained the philosophy perfectly. They stopped focusing on making Luka stronger. The goal became making him faster, and the results were visible before he even returned to Los Angeles. Eurobasket 2025 offered an early preview of what was coming. Luka led the entire tournament in steals at 3.2 per game, while leading Slovenia in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. He earned an All-Star 5 selection and received a Best Defender nomination. Even more importantly, Luka said he felt significantly less exhausted than he had in years. That physical transformation expanded what he could do on the court. Then the Lakers system gave that new version of Luka the perfect environment. Once those two pieces came together, many of the NBA's traditional assumptions about workload and efficiency suddenly stopped making sense. Every generation of basketball has its supposed rules. One of the biggest is simple. Now, opposing defenses have to react to Luka rather than Luka constantly having to react to the defense. The spacing is cleaner. The timing is more precise. Weak side actions flow into a consistent rhythm, and the 5-out structure creates advantages before Luka even begins his move. That difference becomes obvious when you look at how long he holds the ball. In Dallas, Luka averaged 8.8 seconds of touch time per possession, often because he was forced to create the advantage almost entirely by himself. In Los Angeles, the advantage frequently exists before he even receives the ball. His touch time has dropped to 6.1 seconds. That's nearly 3 seconds saved on every touch. Dallas asked Luka to manufacture everything. Almost 48% of his possessions came from pick-and-roll situations, leading to constant traps, difficult pull-ups, and late-clock possessions. Los Angeles completely flipped that formula. Redick spacing and timing create the advantage first. Luka simply chooses the best way to attack it, and the results are showing up across the board. His pick-and-roll efficiency has jumped from 0.92 points per possession to 1.18. His isolation rate has risen to 28%, but that's not because he's suddenly forcing worse shots. It's because the floor finally provides the spacing those isolation possessions require. And at the heart of the entire setup is a simple 3-man combination: Luka Dončić, Austin Reeves, and DeAndre Ayton. Together, they form the Lakers' most efficient 3-man lineup. Reeves is producing around 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists while shooting at an elite level. Ayton screens create clean 4-on-3 opportunities and force defenses into difficult decisions. For the first time in Luka's career, the system isn't asking him to create every advantage from nothing. The advantage is already there, and Luka is exploiting it with ruthless efficiency.
He's now 3 of 7 from three-point range. Came into the game shooting 29% bad pass. And that's another steal for Doncic. Alley-oop to Ayton.
The numbers are starting to look almost impossible. Luka is generating offense at the 99.9th percentile compared with every season ever recorded, regardless of player or era. When adjusted for every 100 possessions, his production ranks among the top 3 seasons in NBA history. That's what makes Luka such a statistical outlier. A workload that should normally destroy a player's efficiency is actually making him more effective. The superstar who once had to fight for every single offensive advantage is now thriving inside a system that creates those advantages before he even makes his move. But even though Luka had finally found his home in Los Angeles, the beginning of the 2025-26 season was anything but calm. The Lakers were dealing with immediate chaos. LeBron James, Luka's childhood idol and now his teammate, was sidelined with sciatica. That meant from the very first game of the season, the Lakers were officially Luka's team to control, and he responded immediately. Opening night against Golden State, 43 points. Game 2 against Minnesota's second-ranked defense, 49 points. That's 92 points across his first 2 games, the most points ever scored by a Laker to begin a season. He passed Jerry West's 1969 mark and moved past Michael Jordan into 4th place on the all-time list. Then, after a brief absence, Luka returned and picked up exactly where he left off. Through his first 5 games, he had already scored 200 points while averaging an incredible 40 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists per game on 50% shooting. He became the first player in NBA history to begin a season averaging 45 points and 5 assists. But the scoring explosion was only one part of the story. Luka wasn't simply producing more individually. He was elevating the entire Lakers offense. When Luka is on the floor, Los Angeles' three-point volume increases by roughly 6%, creating the kind of spacing you'd expect from a modern NBA offense. But when he leaves the court, everything changes. The offense falls apart. Efficiency drops toward the bottom tier of the league. That contrast tells you just how much of the Lakers' offensive identity is now built around Luka. 7 seconds left, and they go right back to him. The ball is knocked away inside. Edwards gets a hand on it. It's loose, but Dončić gets there just in time.
Second to go, and they trap him. Vincent, knocked away inside, sniped by Edwards. It's loose. Doncic in.
That puts Luka in rare territory. Wilt Chamberlain once averaged an unbelievable 37.1 points per game, a number that has become legendary in NBA history. But there is an important piece of context. Wilt played during the fastest-paced era the league had ever seen. When you adjust that production to today's pace, his 37.1 points per game comes down to roughly 30.5. Luka, he remains at 37.1. He's not simply matching historical numbers. He's rewriting the standard itself. And this wasn't just a random hot streak to begin the season. It was a warning to the entire league. For years, Luka Dončić was viewed as the player you targeted defensively. Opposing teams saw him as the weak point, the matchup you hunted, the defender you tried to isolate until you could create an easy bucket. That was the scouting report, but that report is outdated now. During the previous postseason, Luka defended more isolation possessions than any other player in the league, while holding opposing scorers to just 0.66 points per possession. And this season, despite defending the fourth most isolation possessions in the NBA, he's allowing only 0.76 points per possession. Those are elite defensive numbers for almost any player. But for the primary offensive engine of an NBA team, that's what makes the transformation so remarkable.
Opponents shot 39.1% all defensive territory, and he's grabbing a 31.1% defensive rebounding rate.
Opposing players are shooting just 39.1% against him, which puts Luka firmly in elite defensive territory. He's also posting a 31.1% defensive rebounding rate, a number you'd normally associate with a power forward or center, not a ball-dominant guard forward carrying an entire offense. Then came the game that officially put the old scouting report to rest. November 5th in San Antonio, Luka finished with 35 points, 13 assists, 9 rebounds, 5 steals, and 2 blocks. But the box score wasn't even the most impressive part. On the two most important possessions of the game, Luka was matched up one-on-one against Victor Wembanyama and stopped him. The league's most terrifying interior force couldn't create an advantage against the same player analysts once considered one of the biggest defensive weaknesses among superstar players. Wembanyama had started the game by making his presence felt, showing immediately that the Lakers were going to have a difficult night controlling the glass. But Luka refused to back down. Wembanyama later described him as incredibly difficult to move. Marcus Smart heard the defensive numbers and could barely believe them, because Luka isn't simply an offensive superstar anymore. He's becoming a legitimate two-way force. For years, Luka overwhelmed opponents almost entirely through his offense. Now he's impacting games at both ends of the floor, cutting off driving lanes, shrinking passing windows, closing space, forcing turnovers, and still carrying an enormous offensive workload. But this transformation didn't happen by accident. Luka didn't suddenly become a different player in isolation. He escaped a version of himself that had been forced to solve almost every possession on his own. In Dallas, every offensive advantage essentially started from zero. Every read, every rotation, every bailout, Luka had to create it. That wasn't just inefficient. It was exhausting. Possession after possession, he was being asked to manufacture something out of nothing. Los Angeles completely changed that equation. JJ Redick didn't tell Luka to become someone else. Instead, he built a system that finally aligned with the way Luka naturally sees and understands the game.